Hello, everyone. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that our own event, Candid Commerce, is coming to London on February 12th. This is the second time that we do an own event. We did the first one in Amsterdam in September. And this event, the idea is that it brings the spirit and tone of the show to real life. There'll be 4 panels about marketing, e-commerce, retail media, and leadership with senior executives from the likes of L'Oreal, Mars, Lidl, Unilever, Ocado, General Mills, and more. So if you're a director or above, FMCG or retail executive, because this event is exclusively for this crowd and you'd like to join in, please follow the link below to RSVP. There's not many places available, so I can't guarantee that you'll get in, but we look forward to seeing you there. And if you can't come, do stay tuned on our LinkedIn page, or you can contact us directly for more events that will come up very, very soon. And now, here's today's episode.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. As our introduction said, this is the first time you tune in. You'll want to know that this is the show that gives visibility to top voices in consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond. And today, I'm accompanied by no other than my dear co-host, Efrain Rosario. Hey, Efrain, how are you?
Good, Daniel. Good to be with you as always.
And we're recording this as we're coming into Christmas. It's been a good year, this one. We've just reached 19,000 LinkedIn followers, so quite a lot to celebrate.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll see how far we get in these last few weeks of the year. See how close we get to 20,000.
And we'll be starting the new year with a bang, actually, because I'm going to be going to CES in Vegas and then NRF in New York, as our guest today is as well. And later, we're going to both be, Efrain, at our own event, Candid Commerce, number 2 in London. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we've had a lot of people who've expressed interest about wanting to come. So I think it only makes sense for us to do the second one. And this time we're bringing it to London.
We bring it to London and we have very exciting speakers confirmed in retail media, in e-commerce, in marketing, in general management. So if you're a brand or retailer, do reach out to us if you're interested in joining the conversation. So let's go into the conversation today. Retail media has been a big topic this year, and we're not stopping here because today we have another retail media leader coming from a very exciting market and the biggest market in Europe, which is Germany. Efrain, what is your perspective on the German market?
Well, it's interesting for me. So I spent 5 years of my childhood living in Germany. Obviously, I wasn't analyzing the retail market extensively at that time, aside from going to some of these places to get snacks and these kinds of things. But now as an adult, I mean, when I think about the German market, I think, like you said, both scale in terms of its contribution to the overall European landscape, but also secondly, I think about, the presence of some pretty big hitting retailers and just some of the things that they're able to do in terms of driving either new innovation or being able to really bring, world-class activation to market. So that's kind of how I see it through my lens of retail marketing.
Yeah, and I think that a different adoption to e-commerce versus other markets. Some would say more conservative, slower, but also a very different, if you come from an Anglo-Saxon background, a very different split of how the retail is. So, yeah.
And I think also, some of that obviously has to do with the consumer dynamics as well in regards to, the appetite consumers have and how they've grown up in terms of how they've used these different retail channels as well. So I think, that probably in some way, shape, or form has influenced e-com adoption and transformation.
Yeah. So let's go right into it because we have the head of retail media of one of Germany's main grocers, which is REWE. And it's no other than Christian Raveaux, who's their head of REWE Group Retail Media Connect. Hey, Christian, good to see you.
Hi, cool to be here.
Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Cologne, actually, where our headquarters lies.
Nice, nice. And I'm glad that we've finally managed to land you on the podcast. It's been a long chase that I've had with you, Christian, but I'm glad that you're finally here. You're in high demand, so it makes a lot of sense because I know that you're gonna be speaking at NRF, at the Stratacash event, at the Shop Talk Europe as well.
Thank you.
So before we start talking about retail media, and in line of what Efrain and I were talking about, like about the German grocery market, can you tell us a bit about REWE and its unique positioning within the German retail grocery market?
Sure, I can. So the REWE Group is actually one of the largest trade and tourism companies in Europe. We have, next to our grocery trade, we also have I think the second largest tourism operator in Europe. And in terms of retail, I think REWE stands out. That's our main brand in Europe or in Germany with 3,800 stores. And well, I think the unique thing at REWE is that we have quite an ability to combine heritage, innovation, as well as sustainability. So in terms of heritage, REWE is a cooperative. So it's owned by our merchants. And I think we have now 1,400 merchants, something like that. And they obviously have local ties to the communities. And in terms of innovation, so we were, for instance, the first ones to start the delivery service in Germany, as well as pickup service. That's actually really where the journey for retail media at REWE started. And then in terms of sustainability, just recently, we got rid of the paper leaflet. So no more paper post with REWE. That's the kind of things that we do there.
No, it's fascinating to hear you mention, the history of REWE. And Christian, I failed to mention this when we were in the lead up to the episode. My local town, my local grocery store was a REWE. So I have a lot of memories of that store. So you're taking me back. Would love to hear more about, you've been at REWE now, I think for 14 years. Is that right?
Almost 15.
Almost 15. So yeah. I'm curious if you could share with our audience a little bit about, what's happened in those 15 years, close to 15 years in terms of your career progression.
Sure. So I can actually start earlier because more or less I'm into retail from the age of 17 because I started as a pupil working in the local department store, worked in the CD department. So I basically had to secure CDs with these cartridges. And I was standing at the cash desk and had to wrap CDs. And if I was unlucky, I had to wrap stuff from the toys department next door. So this is really where I started. And also when I was attending university, I basically applied at the department store, the local one again, and said, after they asked, like, can you work as a cash clerk? Said, sure, I have experience working at the cash desk. Which was technically true because I was standing there. And so they put me right into the Karstadt sports store. And I really fell in love with retail there. And so therefore I stick to it. I was 2 years at Karstadt working as an assistant to the management board. And then I went to REWE Group, first as an internal consultant, which was great. And it's, by the way, a great career opportunity to start with companies like us as an internal consultant. So got to see a lot of different departments and then basically had to calculate if a loyalty card would be a good idea for REWE. So I did this. And when the business case was finished, they said, okay, now we'll do it. So I stuck to it and then helped basically build up the whole loyalty scheme with payback and had a role in the so-called insight-driven retailing, meaning to establish how to use loyalty data in classical assortment, pricing, and other processes. And then I started with my own little team to do, first of all, the CRM monetization, as well as insights monetization. And from that, really then also grew the retail media stuff.
And was there like a pivotal moment or a project that kind of solidified your interest in retail media, which is like nowadays people know you because you're like retail media?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it was always interesting to see that, when I had the chance to really meet the marketing side of the CPG companies and not the trade side, because that was really where I said, okay, these are the much more interesting conversations. How can we really help them, elevate their game, and how can we consult them using data like loyalty data, but then also using the measures that we have in terms of inventory, etc. I think this more and more, was the thing that I got a neck to.
As somebody who's on the brand side of this relationship, what you're describing is spot on, right? Which is like being able to show the value that something like retail media brings to brand building, and being able to really, tell that story for a brand in a retail environment is really, really powerful. And I think a lot of people on the brand side are getting more and more excited about this day by day. I have a question for you as somebody who I think, one, has been looking after retail media in some way, shape, or form for quite some time, but also as somebody who, as you mentioned, has spent time also building loyalty programs and insight-driven marketing from that loyalty card data. What have you seen in terms of evolution of the topic of retail media in the last few years?
It's been a very interesting evolution. And I think to some points, the evolution was quicker in the US. In other points, it wasn't. I think for me and from my REWE perspective, we did have skin in the game, but we at some point realized that with our existing inventory and processes, much of it was like legacy stuff. Much of it was like, okay, so we will have to do a creative, then give it back to marketing. They have to double check it and give it back to the CPG and so on and so forth. So long processes. And I think that the moment where we substituted this through modern ad servers, through self-service, all of the things that, marketeers, know for 10 years working with Google, with Meta, etc., putting exact the same stuff in our processes, I think that helped a lot. And in terms of loyalty data, I mean, knowing that the EU data protections are stricter than there are in the US, I think you could really see more interesting ways to do, closed loop measurement in the US. And right now, it's kind of like, okay, how can we emulate these kind of things in Europe with the stricter laws, and rightfully stricter laws? And I think, and trying to find this balance between something which is, still legal but on the other hand is super attractive for brands. I think this again pushes boundaries and, brings in new innovation for the whole game.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I think has made retail media successful is that it's both retail and brands have put a big bet on it. Do you think, what's the reason for that?
I think in the beginning, it was a lot of performance marketing, to be honest. Yeah. So everyone was looking at, okay, what's the ROAS? What's the incremental ROAS, et cetera, et cetera. But I think with the ability in a safe way to also use first party data, the potential to use it for upmarket campaigns has risen. And on the other hand, if you look at other traditional marketing channels, especially TV, especially linear TV, you see that it's super difficult nowadays to reach certain audiences. And if you use first party data, you have a better chance to reach them. And I mean, every retailer, especially grocery retailers, are rich with first party data. And then the other thing is, and I should also mention that, for us as a retailer, everyone visits us, everyone buys stuff, their food with us, meaning we see everyone and we can also cluster them and we can also reach them. So it's one of the few POIs really that is able to reach all of the relevant audiences instead of just a few potentially a little bit older audiences.
Sorry, what's a POI?
A point of interest.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's you're spot on about that. Is that it's got application across all types of audiences, no doubt. I'm curious, and some of this I'm kind of reading from your responses in regards to how you've built out the retail media business at REWE Group. How strategic is retail media for REWE? at the end of the day? Like, what role does it play in terms of the overall strategy for the company?
So, I mean, and we have to be honest here. Obviously, it started as a side hustle. Yeah. Something that went a bit along. Yeah. The delivery business and was obviously raising revenues, but really was a side project. I think this changed dramatically over the years, with it now being really something which has full top management endorsement. And with this top management endorsement also comes the ability then to really change things. And that really has been a game changer for us. And so therefore we are always able to, use it and, explore it in a strategic way. Obviously sometimes make mistakes, but then we have the backing and the guidance of the organization.
And what do you think makes REWE's retail media proposition unique right now? Because as we know, this is very dynamic and may look different in 6 months, no?
Yeah. I think one of the unique factors really comes from the German market. As I said, we are market leader in the delivery and pickup service. But then again, if you look at the numbers and see that in the German market, about 3% only of the business is through e-commerce in food, that means that 97% is not. So whilst obviously we had our inventories, ready and set up on our e-commerce sites, we really looked at it the other way around and said, okay, how can we really bolster our presence in our stores? So therefore, I think the unique factor with us is that we established a product which is digital screens in now 3,500 REWE stores. So it's big 65-inch screens at the entrance of the store. We are now also having about 500 at Billa, which is our Austrian counterpart. And we are setting up the stuff also now, I think 4 per store at Penny, which is our discount store. So really, going bold on the POS opportunity, but with a digital way, not just, putting up wobblers, but really trying to reach customers through images. I think this is one of the unique factors. Definitely. And I think the other thing is, at least my team and I, we are people and not machines. So I think what we always bring to the table and want to bring to the table is that we are willing to consult and, find solutions to problems that advertisers might have. Meaning, if you engage us early whilst constructing your media plan, we can certainly help you more if you come with everything completely fixed. And I think this also makes us unique.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, obviously you've alluded to the one example of this, which is the fact that you said that 97% of commerce is still being done in store as opposed to e-com. I'm curious, are there other challenges that you and the Retail Media Connect group are facing, and how are you approaching those in regards to working with the brands advertisers?
If I think about challenges, at the moment, everyone is trying to understand how to deal with retail media. Still the case. So a challenge for a long time, and now sometimes even until now, is how media agencies react to us. And whilst we have now, a great relations with many of them and are in their setups, etc., it's still sometimes hard to reach the media planner who's doing, the media plans and everything else in order to convince him to also use retail media in their plan. I think agencies stick to what they are accustomed to. And so therefore, it's not always easy to bring the message to them like, okay, look at this. If you shift your budget a bit here or shift your budget a bit there, it will bring incremental value.
Interesting. Because agencies at the end of the day, coming from a voice of a certain ignorance, I guess they're like a lot of times like the interface, between the brand and you guys.
They are. And I mean, for me, then also one of the best practices that we have encountered over the years is really to try to work in this triangle, meaning it's not just us at the table with the CPG, but it's really also the agency at the table. And everyone brings in their designated strength. This helps a lot in crafting powerful plans and also in, kind of solidifying the trust that you need to really excel in marketing.
And then you have to fight another battle, Christian, which is the internal battle. As you said, you're all about test and learn, all about innovation. Obviously, that's a bit of a different culture to what you would find on a general retail store, right? In a supermarket. So how do you actually foster that collaboration and culture change between tech, marketing, and also like the retail operations teams at REWE?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's certainly something that doesn't happen overnight. So I think one of the elemental things is to have the trust with us and the merchant department. Because if the category management is distrustful of us, then, there's a problem. Like, we need to know where are, problematic relationships, so that we, for instance, do not make a campaign and then air out a campaign with products which are about to be delisted, for instance. So building up trust there and showing them, we are aiming for different budgets, and basically showing them, look, this is the list of people we are working with. This is the list of people that you are working with. Did you notice they are not the same? These kind of things, they help a lot there. I think then marketing, it's also interesting because obviously they have, their brand in mind, and, everyone, or the marketing potentially has the fear that retail media can really dilute their brand offering. And again, there, it's a level of trust, and it's a level of, showing them what we can do, basically working with them, for instance, through guidelines. These kind of things, they help a lot.
Yeah, no, I imagine. And, I think it's probably the challenge that you're describing is something that a lot of people are dealing with and working through, given the relative newness of retail media.
And I think also it's fascinating, like the dynamic of the buying teams and you guys coordinating actions to really what brands are we building together strategically from a commercial relationship, but also from a marketing relationship, no?
This does not necessarily have to be fully aligned, really, because then, we are looking after brands who are willing to basically, pay us the media revenue, right? Which then again might be something then different than what they are doing strategically. So again, this is something which can lead to a conflict that you have to manage internally, but it certainly can happen because we have a great connection with our category management, but that does not mean that we need to be fully aligned, on every supplier or industry partner, as we call them. And that might lead to these kind of conflicts.
It doesn't need to be exactly proportional, because some companies may want to overinvest in media or underinvest in media and maybe have a different strategy and want to be more on TV or something like that, for example.
Yeah.
So as somebody who is kind of on the forefront of a topic like retail media, I imagine you're exposed to a lot of innovation, both internally but also externally. I'm curious to know, what emerging technologies are you most excited about as we go into 2025?
I'm not sure if this will happen in 2025, but I think
let's look more into the future. I love it.
So I think near future for me means that I think video ads and these kind of things also in an online environment will be much more prevalent than they used to be. I think it's quite exciting. And I think if you're looking more for a long shot, I really believe that something like augmented reality would also be something where we can make a lot of innovative stuff in the future, not just for advertising, but in general, in helping the customer, find their way through the stores, inspire him, etc., etc. So this can be super interesting. And then, of course, it's in every good episode, it should be mentioned, AI helps a lot as well. I think in terms of AI, what I see right now is that you are able to produce much more creatives and then really test them. What creative is really working for what customer audience. And I'm certain this will also be the case soon for video ads, so that they are more and more streamlined through AI for certain audiences. It's kind of cool. It's spooky, but kind of cool.
I think a lot of us think the same, Christian. Something that's not as cool or spooky is a very relevant topic to retail media, and it's something that we spoke about, for example, with the IAB recently, is standardization, which is basically again having the same measurement across media networks. Will we get there? Is there like an actual interest in getting to that standardization?
Yes and no. So for me, standardization is both a challenge and an opportunity. So if you have shared metrics and platforms, I think this will make retail media even more attractive for brands. Yes. And for platforms, we see that some builders, some vendors are building interesting, tech to help gain this access easier and across the board. So I believe in broad terms, we are on the right tech. But then what I'm worried about, especially with retail media, is over expectation. Meaning, yes, you can measure a lot. Does that mean that you need to measure a lot? Saying that, in many other fields of marketing, we see lukewarm metrics at best, and everyone is fine with that. So I would really expect a bit more sobriety from the market in realizing, okay, what is really, needed here versus, show me everything.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, that choiceful thinking around, what data and what metrics you look at, because, most companies don't lack for data. They just lack for useful and practical metrics.
Exactly.
So as somebody who's coming at this from a brand point of view, I'm curious to know, what kinds of conversations are you having with brands right now in regards to how they can better leverage the retail media network you all provide?
Yeah. They differ, of course. I think some of the brands, we are having really conversations about lighthouse campaigns. And obviously I like them a lot. Can give you an example of a recent campaign here. So we had a campaign with Pepsi Electric Blue. We had the exclusivity of it in Germany. And so what they did, basically put on the table, was they aired a couple of adverts on the I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here summer edition with a little, call to action, now buy it at Rewe. Then our inventory was full with Pepsi Electric Blue. But what we also did is that we kind of made some nice social media bits and videos where people tested the stuff in our stores. It was quite funny because, it looks super blue. Yeah. So it's, really, really interesting to look at and to then taste it. And so that gave some funny moments that we then aired. And so it was a really great 360 campaign with good sales results as well. And so I'm quite happy to do more of these kind of 360 campaigns. But then again, not everyone should or can do that. So I think what I'm seeing right now is a lot of always on campaigns, like really hitting, the right inventory spots, etc., that you need, which is mostly performance driven. But then I think these kind of things, it's and the mixture of both. That's what we observe right now.
And since like brand are your counterpart, we always see things that we would do differently on the other side. If you look at the way that brands are approaching retail media right now, or your own REWE Retail Media Connect, what are the 3 key recommendations, 2, 3, 4, whatever, that you would give them in terms of how can they actually, maximize the opportunity?
Yeah. I think my best recommendation there is come to us with problems. I said it before, but it's so true, because once you have a 60% solution, it makes much more fun to really engage with it and look, okay, how can you help here? How can you help there? What is the right inventory? What are the right metrics? What can you do around it? So I think this is something that they really should do. And then I think, doing sponsored product ads, I think that should be a given. I would always do that because it's so easy, and it's so easy also to convince your internal controlling that retail media actually works. But then again, I think depending on your goals, you should really start the discussion with us, just start it and then see where you're going.
So Christian, that's actually really, really helpful in terms of even for me as I internalize those recommendations. So thank you for sharing those. You started to do some of this when we asked about the technologies that are getting you excited. So I'm curious if I could ask you again to go into your time machine and fast forward 5 years from now, what would be your ideal vision of REWE Media Group? Or Media Connect, Retail Media Connect.
My vision, like in terms of in 5 years?
Yes. Where do you see Retail Media Connect in 5 years?
So I think to borrow something from Amazon here, I think we are really at day one. So there is so much potential in what retail media can do. So I think in terms of what you can see in store, what you can see on our own property as well as on other properties, I think everything now, if you look back 5 years from now to now, would look like, okay, it's a bit clumsy what they're doing there. But I think in 5 years, I think everything of that would be much more streamlined. I really believe that retail media can help brands do omni-channel marketing the right way. From the couch through, going through the city, visiting the store. And I also believe that the measurement of this would be much more transparent. And then also the way of, reacting to the measurement and adapting your campaigns would be much easier. So I think this really one size fits all kind of campaign will not be there in 5 years from now, but it would be really into a lot of micro campaigns tailor-made for special customer groups, because really, there is not the one society which, everyone falls in love with a certain brand. But even if they do, I think everyone needs a special access to it or has a special access to it. And I think this will be something we'll see more and more.
Interesting. Well, now from the future to the past, Christian, because this is our famous last question, which is, and you talked about your career, super interesting. I mean, you've been in retail. Do you live in a shop? But like with all the experience that you've had in retail across function, across companies, leading teams, if you had to give like one key piece of advice to your younger self at the beginning of your career, what would it be?
So Daniel, I thought of this question really hard, and therefore I actually have two answers. So I'll start with
You're not the first one. Don't worry. At least it's 2 and not 5.
Yeah. So I'll start with the first one. I think when you start your career, you really want to excel in the department that you're in, which is fine. But I think the advice that I'll give is really look also what are the adjacent departments doing? What are the stakeholders to this department doing? Understand them culturally, understand them content-wise, because at one stage you will learn that, you are not an island, but you are someone who really needs to make good use of relations with everyone else in the company and outside the company. So therefore, if you really think of this, you can't think of this too early. So that's my number one.
What's number two? I love the number one, by the way. It's a great advice to not live in an island or in your own shell, because it's also like a bit of like it's a bit like an insurance policy for your own career, right? Because if you only do one thing and you're very focused and you don't build your network, if that thing becomes obsolete, you're screwed.
You're screwed. That's right. And number two, and finally, also the second important term, I'll finally name it. Think of the customer, right? Even if you are into retail media, but everywhere else, really think about the customer. What is he expecting? What is she expecting? And then act to their needs, and there also go the distance. And I can tell a little story then from back to my days at Karstadt Sports. I once had a customer there, and she wanted to have or wanted to buy some training pants for her boyfriend. And so I helped her, these are the training pants and so on and so forth. And then she said, like, you kind of have the same stature. Could you try them on for me? And I spent like literally 20 minutes trying on different track pants for her, especially her boyfriend. Obviously bought it at the end. It was a funny situation. I think everyone else was laughing at me there. But I mean, eventually she bought it. And that's what I mean. Yeah, think of the customer and then go full distance.
Love it. Love it. So Christian, Efrain and I are going to try to summarize the learnings that we've had, which have been many from this conversation. Mm-hmm. So other than you started working when it was barely legal at age 17 in a retail store, what are the conclusions do you have, Efrain?
So I enjoyed hearing your perspective, Christian, when it came to, the fact that I think there's a lot of interesting parallels to some of the things you did earlier in your career in regards to building the loyalty program and thinking about what that does in terms of being able to drive insights, actionable insights for the business, but then also CRM monetization. I could just, what's fascinating to me as you were walking us through that part of your career, you could see how those things ultimately, hopefully have served you well in your current role, leading retail media for REWE Group. So that to me was one of the initial things that stuck out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot.
What about you? Sorry, go ahead.
There's a lot to take out of this. Like, I just feel like it's incredible, like how the conversation has shifted in the last 2 years. It's completely insane, but it all makes a lot of sense as well. So I think that, Christian, you were saying that it's something that's always existed, but once you put like a decent tech stack and you basically treated it like a business, it's really changed the whole conversation. So it was first about ROAS and a way to make money, if you like, but now it's all around first party data, our market campaign. So it's really like changing the dynamic within the retailer, within the brand, and especially between retailer and brand, no?
I tend to, what I wrote down as Christian was explaining it is that, it is in a lot of ways doing what we've always done, but doing it in a faster, more effective sort of way. So you're gaining both efficiency and effectiveness through retail media with things that, other retailers, but Christian specifically was doing earlier on. So to me, I think that really resonated with me as well. The other thing that I noted was, thinking about, like you were saying, Christian, in some ways, retail media has been accelerated in places like the US. But I think, we always hear about, the fact that we've got, certain constraints when it comes to personal data here in Europe. And just listening to how, what is the impact of that in terms of, like, for example, delivering on the promise of closed loop measurement, I think really kind of starts to crystallize it for me as well in regards to, like, what are the things we still need to solve for that, could be that catalyst to really even continue to drive it faster here in Europe.
I think another important thing, like the importance of in-store, and we talked about that recently with Chris Regal from StrataCash, but like the fact that 3% of the groceries done online and 97% of not, it doesn't mean that retail media is not an opportunity. It actually is, but you have to be realistic with where your shopper's buying at the end and maybe have a more holistic campaign.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think it's a brilliant example of turning challenge to opportunity, right? And they're like thinking about what is it that you can do through in-store media. And like you said, this really dovetails nicely with our conversation with Chris from StrataCash.
Yeah. And I love the recommendations also that you gave to FMCGs, which you'd already mentioned. You mentioned it twice. I think it's very interesting to not come to you with they can with a campaign that's already done, fine, but they can actually use you as a consulting, and you have a consultant background as well, Christian, so you're the perfect person for that. But like to actually get some ideas of how to approach retail media because you have the benchmarks and you've done it time and time again. I think that's a great call to action, if you like. Doing like sponsored products is like a must. And yeah, depending on the goals, having that conversation early. I mean, I think that's a great takeaway.
And if I could just put a cherry on this sundae, I think, I also really liked that you called out being choiceful in terms of the data and the metrics that you use. I think with something as powerful as retail media, it's very easy and very seductive to fall into the trap of like saying, give me all the data, as opposed to saying, what is it that I'm actually wanting to measure that's going to have the impact that I desire? So I think being choiceful is another great piece of advice.
So Christian, we'll be leaving your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. If anyone from the brand side is thinking of doing retail media campaigns, they can contact you, I imagine.
Yeah, of course. Happy to join any conversation there.
Excellent. Well, Christian, thanks so much for joining. Really excited about meeting in person. Starting at NRF, I feel like we'll be meeting in person a few times soon. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a blast.
Excellent. Well, thanks to all our audience for listening to us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great day.